All right, now we're going to talk about smart objects. And to explain why we need them, I'm going to work with the text tool, the type tool here, which I don't even know if we've worked with this yet. But it's the letter T. And if I just click on there, it puts some dummy text in there automatically. And I can get the text tool and highlight it and change it. I'm going to change it to a big old letter T. There's the letter T, and I want to change the size. So I can go up here at the top and you can see where the font is. I can change the font. Let's see here. I want something with serifs, kind of like a Times. Let's see. Okay, go all the way down to T. T for Times. And or even Trajan. Trajan would be nice. Okay, so that's got a serif, but it's still kind of small. It's because it's 20 points, so I want this a lot larger. I'll make it 72. Even that's not very big. So I can actually highlight this and type in a value. I'm going to type in 300, okay, and it'll take effect when I click over into this other box. There it is, and that's not even big enough. I'm going to make this 600. There we go. Maybe I'll zoom out and see how big this is. Oops. Hold down Option to zoom out. There it is. I'll get the four-headed arrow to move it down. Okay, now, if I wanted to put a filter on this, I couldn't do it. Like if I go to Filter, Filter Gallery, it won't happen. It says, you've got to rasterize this thing. Turn it into a raster before you can put a filter on it. Or it says, Convert to Smart Object. This means that you don't have to rasterize it. And you may wonder, well, what difference does it make? Well, I'll do plastic wrap shows a little bit. Since there's only one flat color, we're running into that problem where nothing shows up. I'll do sponge. Sponge shows up. Let's see. Smooth this. Okay, so I can see the sponge effect. There we go. But what's the big deal about whether it's rasterized or not? Well, if it's not rasterized, that means I can resize it without losing any data at all. So I've made this letter T. I can do Command T, and the filter disappears while I do this, but I can shrink it down and hit return, and it's this size here. But if I decide to make it bigger, I can do Command T and enlarge it. And what's happening is, normally if this was a rasterized image, I would be losing data. It would be losing resolution. It would be getting rough when it gets really small, and when I bring it back up, it would be rough. In fact, I'll show you. Let me duplicate this. I'm gonna, well, actually, let me do this. I'll make a letter T. I'll make a letter M. Okay. So I've got this letter M. Maybe I'll make it a different color just so we can see it. And I'll do blue. Okay. All right. So there's my blue letter T. And then I'll just say that I want to put a filter on it. And this time I'll say rasterize instead of smart object. All right, so now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give it a, maybe I'll do, yeah, it's probably the only thing it's going to show on a flat color. Well, sponge, it's a little hard to see, but I'll go with that. Okay, and just to help with the visibility, I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to choose this color and make it lighter just so you can see it. Okay, so there's the letter M, and then if I resize this, Command T, and shrink it down to something very small and hit return. Okay, it's small, but if I decide to resize this back up, Command T, and resize it back up, and hit return, look how fuzzy it is. it's lost resolution. When I shrunk it down, it went down to a much lower resolution, and now it's bigger, but it's fuzzy. Okay, that's because it was rasterized and not turned into a smart object like the T. The T is still a vector, even though it's got a filter on it. So there, right there, is the benefit of a smart object. Okay, now you can also, I'm just going to hide that thing now. You can actually put layer styles on letters, like we did before. I'm going to do layer style. I'm going to do bevel and emboss. And this is kind of the fun sort of thing you can do. And change that gloss contour back to this. Okay, I can play with the lighting and all that. Let's go with this right now. This looks pretty good. That's an inner bevel. I can do an outer bevel. Or pillow emboss. There's all these things you should play with and just see what you get. And there's other layer styles too. There's like inner glow, where you can this doesn't look very obvious right now, but again, I play with it. Let's see, where's outer glow? Outer glow, you can give yourself a huge glow like that if you need to. Okay, fun stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to go back to this. So if I look at my layer, it's got the bevel and emboss and some smart filters there. All right, now, here's that same phenomenon. If I get the eraser, it's not going to let me erase. And let's see. I'm going to show you how the eraser will affect it. Right now this T is no longer a smart object. It's been rasterized somewhere during this process. So if I were to erase across it, it has a bevel and emboss effect, but it goes across everything there. Alright, now if I do layer smart objects, convert to smart object, alright, if I erase with the bevel and emboss on there, you can see that it changes because the bevel and emboss effect is happening again at the edges because it is a layer style. And so the layer style happens at the edges, but if I rasterize instead, if I do layer, rasterize, layer style, and then erase, it acts like that. Very, very different. Okay, so you can actually rasterize a layer style. You can actually make to where it behaves differently when you put the eraser on there. All right, let me go back in time a little bit to when I rasterized this layer, and let me put one more layer style on here, a very common one, the drop shadow. So I'll put the drop shadow on here, and I'll make the distance bigger so you can see what happens. Okay, and again, if I erase through the letter, then it'll erase the effect as well. But what if I say, you know what, I don't want the letter to be erased, I just want to erase the drop shadow. I want the drop shadow itself to be this separate thing. You can separate these layer styles from the letter. And here's what you have to do. You have to go to layer, layer style, and then create layers. And watch what happens. Okay, just click OK when you get that warning. And you get a bunch of new layers. And here they are. Like it's separated everything. The inner bevel shadows are their own layer. The inner bevel highlights are their own layer. There's the letter T by itself. Those are clipped to it. And then here's the drop shadow. The drop shadow is a separate thing. If I want to, I can just erase the drop shadow and nothing happens to the rest of it. So you can separate layer styles after you've made them and just do work on them individually. Like here I'm just dealing with the shadow. Here I could just erase the highlight. So you can make all these things independent if you go to Layer, Layer Style, and then Create Layers. That'll give you the most options possible.